Hello everyone, Wylock here, welcome back. A reading from the book of Out of the Abyss, as performed by one of the great YouTube scriveners of Dungeons & Dragons lore, Jordan from Forgotten Realms Explained.
In ages past, at the height of Faerun's great empires of magic, the half-elf sorcerer Briseis of Khaem was interred in a floating tomb. After the fall of the Empire of the Netheril and its flying cities, Briseis' tomb plummeted into a crevasse and wound up in the Underdark, where it has remained for centuries. The rise of the demon lords has awakened Briseis from the eternal sleep of death as a wraith. Served by specters who were once her loyal retainers, Briseis yearns to accumulate enough life force to leave the confines of her tomb, to which her spirit is bound.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that very much. Now, in case you're not familiar with Out of the Abyss, here's what's going on. There's a section in the early part of the book that is chock full of encounters for all the travel time between the major set pieces. Rarely are they tied to the main story, they're just kind of side adventures, interesting things to encounter. The Lost Tomb of Khaem is one of them, and I love it. It's a short dungeon, fits in a 3-hour session, lots of blanks for the DM to fill in, and it follows the 5-block formula. Thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to break out my tiles and show how they can be used. This is what I did a couple weeks ago when I ran it for my group. Thing is, about 4 hours before the game I realized I needed a few extra features to fill out the table a little bit, so I speed crafted some things, and we'll break away and I'll talk about them as we go. Here's the whole thing laid out. Now the book gives a few pointers as to how the party might stumble across the entrance, but one way or another they do. And here's where we take our first pause. To quote the book, each door in the tomb is a 10 by 10 foot slab of solid marble encased in a thin layer of beaten bronze, which has turned green with age. The door pivots on a central axis, creating narrow openings on either side when open. Foam board. So I'm going to cut out 2 rectangles and find their centers and just poke holes in them. These are 2 by 3/4 inch. One will be the top and one will be the bottom. To add some weight, I hot glued 2 pennies to the bottom one. And then cereal box, or any decent cardstock. Cut a strip and hot glue it around to shroud the pennies or the washers, whatever you use. Again, this is the bottom of the door frame. And then another rectangle of that cereal box glued to the top piece. Now to make that pivoting about its center part, we're going to use kebab skewers. So I cut a 1.5 inch square of cereal box and hot glued a skewer to the middle, making sure that it's too long by a few millimeters at each end. These are what are going to go into the holes in the top and the bottom slabs. And now to fill out the depth of the door with some more foam board, just cut pieces to fill in both sides, and complete the sandwich with a final layer of cereal box. 2 more foam board rectangles to make the sides of the door frame round out all the components, and here they are, and I strongly recommend painting them before assembly, it's going to be a lot easier. I applied my normal dungeon scheme, so I based in black, and then with a dark gray and a light gray and some kitchen sponge, I dab on the dark gray first, and the light gray second, much more sporadically. Now the doors have a bronze surface, right? So that's what I used, metallic bronze paint, a solid coat of it. They're also greened with age, so I tapped way back into the past, episode 33 when we did those currency props. So a dark and a plain green, sponge on some of the dark green, and then sponge on some plain green, ideally over spots where you already laid down the dark. Kinda sorta stick to the perimeter and don't go overboard with this. Assembly is easy. I just hot glued the sides to the bottom, and then insert the door pole, and then attach the top by prepping some thin beads of hot glue along those sides and just keeping an eye on the alignment of the post as you sink the top on there. Voila, rotating door. So anyway, the entrance is open and we go into the first room. Now notice this is a 30 by 30 foot room, but I have tiles showing 20 by 20. Honestly, I recently gave away a lot of tiles to a viewer, and my supply is severely diminished. I didn't have enough field tiles to do a 30 by 30 here, but this room has no tactical elements to it. All it has is some artwork. There's a diorama of Briseis in her prime among servants, so I felt fine compromising. As for that artwork, I just made a large clip-on. I'll put a card on the screen with a playlist of clip-on features we've built in the past on the channel. This was just a Google image search for some kind of stone carving. I think it's from Skyrim, actually. Anyways, down the stairs to room 2. For the shreds of tapestries on the floor, I rapidly threw some paint onto cardstock, cut out rectangles, nicked at them randomly with scissors, and then crinkled them up in my fist. Done and done. The pale gray altar is just some slabs of XPS foam, beaten up with a rock for texture, and then hot glued together and painted. Didn't even bother with highlighting or washing. I had 2 hours to go until the game. Now this room I actually added an encounter to pad the time. When the party touched the altar, they all went into a shared vision of the past, where they were Briseis' guards, defending her against the final onslaught of paladins that had invaded her palace. They all got to witness and briefly participate in the end of an era, before dying in battle, the vision ending, and all of them gaining 2 new levels of exhaustion. There are 2 stone doors on the way to room 4, not sure why, and even though those shelves of clay pots are supposed to be stone, I ain't got time for that. Wooden shelves with potions is close enough to represent this on the game table. The sarcophagus is just cereal box cut and scored into that shape, coat it with black and a heavy dry brush of gray. Then I hot glued on some random costume jewelry bead. 10 minutes, done and done. There's enough in this room for the players to get themselves into trouble on, including the trap on the sarcophagus and whatever they decide to do with those pots of desecrated organs. Moving on to room 3, the false tomb. We're 1 hour from game time at this point. So it's Google image search for textures, print, and glue stick onto cereal box. That's how I made these 4 coffins. 10 minutes, good to go. And when the specters arise, Shazam, cardstock miniatures. Another 10 minutes to make these, just as I explained way back in episode 9 and live stream number 2. Going underneath that coffin in the corner to the secret passageway leads to room 5, the true tomb. And again, like I said, I ran out of tiles, but luckily I had these 3D printed TrueTiles prototypes. I know there's thousands of you customers out there, and here's a fun fact. What you're looking at are 6 of the first batch of 20 TrueTiles that were ever printed. Pretty neat. Anyway, the gilded sarcophagus, again, this is print and paste, but then I also hot glued on some of those flatback crafting gemstones. And I placed it on a 2x1 single wide hallway tile, which serves as the stone plinth. And of course, a wraith miniature for Briseis herself when she arises. Also, this isn't described in the book or anything, but I figured I'd put this shrine on as well. Did not plan anything for it or what it does. Instead, I just planned to simply put it on the wall and ask the players what they think or hoped it would do, and then fed off of that. Try and use your terrain that way. Sometimes it's okay to let your terrain itself create the story, rather than creating terrain to demonstrate a story, if that makes sense. So they got through the tomb, they found Dawnbringer, they lit it up, and all of their armor predictably dissolved, and that's where I ended the session. I know reviews are mixed on Out of the Abyss, but I am loving it as a DM. If you're new to the channel, I have tutorials for all the stuff you saw in this video, just check my back catalog. And thanks again to Jordan of Forgotten Realms Explained. If you liked this particular project, here's 2 more that you should go check out right now. Also, enjoy this community showcase. And don't forget to subscribe and click that bell reminder icon. I am Wylock, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.